SKF1. My name is Rich, and this is your daily dose of F1 news. We're going to be talking about the ownership of Formula One and the war of words going on between Formula One and the FIA. And also, we're going to be talking about Sky Sports reporters and pundits, so on and so forth. Please do make sure you've hit that like button and also subscribed to the channel. Now, we're going to open this up with Johnny Herbert and Paul di Resta have been dropped, apparently, by Sky Sports. And I've seen a lot about this over everywhere on social media, actually, about Sky Sports dropping these two. Now, I would love to know your opinions on Johnny Herbert and Paul di Resta as pundits, and what you thought of them on the Sky coverage. If you had the Sky coverage, I can't say I'm overly shocked. I've spoken to a few people about these two, and people consider Johnny Herbert a super nice guy, and he seems really nice and lovely and things like that. But someone described him as a sort of merchant to me, which is kind of what I agree with. He says sort of in every conversation. And Paul di Resta, honestly, for whatever reason, I've always just found him a little bit of a Captain Obvious with his punditry. But, you know, that ain't me wishing him bad or anything, but I'm not shocked that both of them have been dropped. I think if you watch the Sky coverage, if you compare these two to, say, a Karun Chandhok or an Anthony Davidson, I think those two are much more critical with their punditry. And I think that while they still, each of them have their own biases and things, I think they analyse Formula One in a much better way, personally. That's my opinion. But it has been confirmed, and that they're not going to be replaced, I have read. Good morning, everyone. Rob saying, Johnny was sound, I thought. Paul, meh. Yeah, it's kind of how I feel. I mean, I watched one of them a while ago. It was Paul di Resta and Nico Rosberg. And Paul di Resta kept correcting stuff that Nico Rosberg was saying. And you can think what you like about Nico Rosberg, but he is a former F1 world champion. And the way Paul di Resta was correcting him, it was just a bit like you need to stay in your lane a little bit. But it was very, very clear those two didn't get on, you know, Paul di Resta and Nico Rosberg, again, for whatever reason. And, you know, it depends. It depends. I just hope this ups the quality of punditry. I don't watch Sky coverage anymore. I watch F1 TV, but I'll be interested to see if they replace them and who they replace them with, because we have seen other outlets get rid of some of their anchors and co-anchors and replace them genuinely with newer fans to F1. I saw one where someone had been taken on literally because they've only been a fan of literally only being a fan of Formula One for a couple of years because of Drive to Survive. And I think it's actually, I was wondering how I felt about that, but actually, you know, it is a demographic that needs representation, right? There are a lot, millions probably, of new fans within Formula One. So maybe you do need someone who's there to ask the obvious questions and provide the obvious answers. I don't know, but there we go. Those two have been dropped. I'm not shocked. And I think Sky have kept generally the people that they should have kept. And that's where we're at. Rosberg did seem to think he was always correct because he was a world champ. Probably. You love the awkwardness. Well, it just made me cringe. But that was a little bit of a side note to the next news piece that really, I'm really hoping we can have a little bit of back and forth with a chat in this one, because I think it's really important for F1 to have this conversation. But here we go. These two. Now, I know Mohammed, he's involved in this. I don't know about Stefano Domenicali specifically. I think I've seen a couple of quotes. Now, earlier in the week or the end of last week, we reported that it had come out that there had been a bid in 2022 of 20 billion by the Saudi investment fund, PIF, I believe it is. And now, if you're unaware of those, I'll explain in a minute. Make sure you're smashing that like button and hitting the subscribe button. They are the Saudi sovereign fund, basically, and they are the ones who have bought Newcastle United and immediately made them, I believe, the richest club in the world. And I can't remember exactly what their wealth is just in the fund. I think I checked, and it was in the region of the upper 600 billions. So it was like 620, 680 billion dollars is the wealth fund that made a bid on Formula One. And it came out that they'd made this bid, and they'd made it very clear that they were open to increasing this bid if required. And the FIA president came out and said it's super important that we don't overvalue F1. Okay, now my stance on this, the only comment I got about this was someone said it doesn't matter who owns it as long as the racing continues. And this is kind of the point. The commercial rights holder can almost do what they like. If you're thinking about F1 in its current state, what has come into Formula One since 2017? You've had a lot of things come into Formula One. We've had the influx of Drive to Survive. We've had lots of new dates on the calendar. We've had lots of new locations on the calendar. We've had new rules implemented where they've changed the entire vehicle. It's super important. It's super important. So this is a really big conversation that needs to be had. Okay, so on the one hand, you have the Saudi investment fund saying, we've offered you 20 billion. You said no, we will give you more. They haven't said blank check it, but what do you want? And to be fair, the racing is what the FIA president has said in saying we need a plan. If this is going to happen, one, don't overvalue it, and two, we need a plan. You can't just come in and buy it. You need a plan and a direction you want to be taking Formula One and what you want to do with Formula One. And that's what I was on about the other day. I was saying we can't just sell because there's an offer there. You can't just do that. It wouldn't be right. There's no due diligence. And it's literally like someone just buying your football club or buying whatever and then just treating it like a plaything or running it into the ground or using it for its profits, anything. So you really do need some kind of plan here. Perspective: Man City 22 billion, Newcastle 620 billion. The rich get richer. Well, I don't think it's that simple, Dan. I really don't think it's that simple. I can see protests at F1 events in the future. Potentially. Now, I think the FIA stance on this is quite mature. I think it's the right way to look at it. Like, okay, you're coming in with offers, but you're not saying anything. You're just throwing money at it. And that's kind of what you're saying. Now, F1, the commercial rights holders, Liberty Media, basically said, stay out of this. This is nothing to do with you. Get out of our business. It's nothing to do with you. Now, I've explained FIA, F1, they're like two separate entities. And I've done a little bit more digging on this so I can understand it more, because that has been my understanding, that the F1 as a commercial entity is a separate thing to the FIA. And I've been doing some digging about this and what it actually means and what it would mean for Formula One. Okay, so what we've got is the FIA, and they can decide rules and they can push through rules and so on and so forth. They largely leave it up to Formula One to do want to do within reason. But the FIA, what happened was back in 2000, Bernie Ecclestone secured a 100-year lease or rental, or however you want to term it, of Formula One as an entity and a commercial thing for 100 years. And then that is what was sold to Liberty Media. But the FIA still do own it. So it's kind of like a property has a landowner, or maybe there's a landowner and he leases or she leases this block of land to someone else to develop on, but they still own the land. So in 100 years, that reverts back to that landowner. And that's the situation we've got here. They own F1 still, but F1 does have a large amount of autonomy. Now, on top of this, the FIA do have a clause in the lease, which they have very literally called the Don King clause, where the FIA have the power to veto any deal. So F1 saying, get out of our business, it's nothing to do with you, is everything to do with the FIA. At any point, the FIA can come in and go, nope, we're not having this. See you later. So the Saudi sovereign fund could come in and say, look, don't want to mess about here, 100 billion, give us it. And Liberty Media could go, ooh, what an investment that was. Cheers. Thanks for coming. And then the FIA go, no, you're not doing that. And there's nothing legally in any way F1 can do about that, because that's the contract. That is a core term of the lease. Now, this is a thing that I think is being slept on in media, and generally it's been seen as a little bit of back and forth. But I think this is huge. I honestly think this is huge news. There are huge players involved. It is the very ownership and how Formula One operates that we're talking about. It's beyond a driver move. It's beyond Helmut Marko talking about tense situations at Mercedes, like he knows anything about the situation at Mercedes. This is the entire sport. And I've always maintained, above teams, above drivers, above anything, I'm a fan of Formula One as a sport. And it worries me a little bit. Now, is the a change of ownership to PIF a bad thing? I don't believe it is inherently. Is it a good thing? Who knows? I would like pretty much what the FIA have said. If they're serious about it, come to the table with like a 10-year plan with what you would like to do with the sport, or what you intend to do with the sport. What would you want to do with it? You know, I don't think it's as simple as just turning up with a wheelbarrow full of money and saying, give us it. You have to put a plan in place. Now, on the flip side of it, like, I'm making them sound like they're naive about it, the investment fund. I think if you look at what they're doing at Newcastle, if you're into your football at all, they seem to be going about things the right way there. They seem, from the outside, I'm not a Newcastle fan, but they haven't gone mad spending money. They've appointed the right people from the looks of it. They're really trying to structure things. And let's not forget, these things are investments. They are investments. They'll have bought the football club to make money one day. They will sell it. It's an investment. One day they will sell it to make money. They'll buy Formula One for $30 billion with a view to selling it for 60 in 15, 20 years. That's the very point. It's an investment fund. Are they more of a sleeping partner at Newcastle? Well, I mean, they own it. They own it. I don't think it's a sleeping partner. They own it. They own it. They've got some faces for it, but no, they're not a sleeping partner. They own it. I don't think they date. I think There is an element of financial fair play in football. They can't physically spend what they want, but you're right. They seem to be doing things in the correct way. And indeed, I don't want to make this a football conversation, but we do have an example. While it's not as big as Formula One, we do have an example of a sporting franchise. I don't want to call a football club a franchise, a sporting commodity being bought by this very group of people. And they seem to be doing all right there. And some would argue Liberty Media have extremely Americanized Formula One in the past. Well, coming towards a decade. What is it? It's six years, so not decade. But some not always a bad thing. That it's not a bad thing. I just think I agree with the premise that they need to come to the table with more than just money. And I think the difference with football and with Formula One is football has, as John mentioned, financial fair play, and I would imagine there's like I think they call it the fit and proper test, and that's why it was so difficult for them to buy Newcastle, just because of their own country's human rights issues and things. I think there was all sorts to do with that. And there's that whole moral argument as well. Should the ownership be protested because of the human rights issues in Saudi? And is that a barrier to people? And you know, can Formula One maintain a we race as one message while owned by that? Like there's so much to unravel and talk about when it comes to this situation. And I'm really surprised that the main media outlets aren't all over this. And I mean, if form serves, they probably will be in about 3 weeks' time saying all the stuff I'm saying. But there's so much to be said, so much to be unraveled here. I'd like to know. Actually, let's do a poll. I don't think there's many in, but would you be against a sale to this investment fund? Question: yes, no. Ask your community. There you go. There's a poll in chat now for you guys to answer. Just I mean, there's not a huge amount of people in, but it's an important conversation to have, I think. Please do smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. I think my general worry as a fan is the general direction of the sport, prices, venues. I worry that current ownership and future ownership is only there to make more and more money. Would be nice to see money going back towards the fans and communities from the top of motorsport. And you know what? Look, I'm on board with that. I'm fully on board with that, John. Because look, I called it immediately. Going to Las Vegas for the Formula One. Look, there's nothing. I have nothing inherently against more races in the USA. Nothing. But as soon as it was announced, I said normal people won't be able to afford to go to the Las Vegas F1 race. They won't, because all the casinos and different resorts will buy up all of the tickets and make massively expensive packages. What's happened? But then it comes out it's going to be worth $1.3 billion for the economy. And now you have to look at it and say, well, how much does Silverstone make? I bet it's nowhere near $1.3 billion. How much does Spa make? Nowhere near $1.3 billion. And it's a crazy one. The sport it's crazy, isn't it, Rob? Because the problem is, I suppose, there are always people that can afford to pay it, whether they're famous or not particularly famous, but whether they can afford it or not. It doesn't matter if the person is considered normal or a normal everyday person, does it? As long as someone's paying for it. and that is a problem. Which track was it that's got 8,000 capacity? Was it Losail? Something like that. And F1 are going back there. Now, I've got no problem with the circuit itself as a circuit, but it's got 8,000 capacity. No one's doing that to make money. No, what's the capacity at Silverstone? If they're struggling year on year and they've got like what 80,000, probably more, that they can get into the circuit each day of it being held there, and they're struggling to run it, how is Losail managing to run that on a profit at 8,000 capacity? They're not. It's literally 250 across 3 days. Yeah, I was. I was just trying to think of the capacity day. 140k for 1 day, compared to 8,000. And there's this whole conversation. Would new ownership guarantee certain? Like for me, I'd like to see guarantees. Would there be X amount of European rounds? Like, I'm not being anti any country, but that is where the history of Formula One is. It is in Europe. Are we going to see more rounds per season? Are we going to see more Middle East? Are we going to see more USA? What are we going to see? What are we going to see regulatory, speaking about regulations and things? See, I was worried about going live this morning because I thought I've only really got one subject that I want to talk about. And am I going to be able to speak about this for half an hour? And I think I still need to make a video on this really and talk about it, don't I? But look, we've got 77% of people would be against a sale to this investment fund. I'm not initially against it, but I want more answers. I'm against it until I get more answers. 142,000 for 2022. That's, yeah, I thought it was 100,000 plus. Yeah. The thing I'm not going to, thing is, I'm not going to Silverstone this year for the prices of tickets. Instead, doing 6 hours of Spa WEC, way better price, and you get so much more for your money. And this is the thing, George. You can say that though until you're blue in the face. Generally, I remember. Look, I'm friends with a chap who is F1 mad, and then he went to British Touring Car and absolutely loved it. I was one of those kinds of people as well, but I couldn't afford Formula One. Certainly can't afford Formula One this year. Bloody hell! Like, it's just not happening. And I think that's a crying. It's a crying shame. If you look at anything, really, it's so much cheaper. If you're looking at, okay, I've been to world events for motorcycles and cars and stuff like that. To me, nothing compares to the spectacle of Formula One, and I think it should be experienced. But beyond that, like, if you're a racing fan, well, there you go, Brisker F1. But like, I'm not even joking, John. If you're a motorsports fan, standing at the side at Skegness Stadium there, right next to those F1 stock cars going past, that was an experience. That was an insane experience, and people will scoff, think I'm somehow taking the mick with that. I'm not at all. Like, as someone who has loved motorsport all my life, stood there, and me and John looked at each other, giggling our heads off, just like, I think I've gone deaf. What happened? And there's so much to be. I think it's losing sight. F1 is quickly losing sight of what it is and what it was as a sport. Like the Garagistas and how it started. It's always been, well, it started, as a gentleman's sport, but I would argue it. You speak about, you can speak about football as like the working men's game. I'm not really sure of the actual sort of saying on that. It could be argued that early motorsport and even Formula One wasn't far away from it, with just how they turned up on a shoestring and got things done. And it's it pains me. It pains me because you can go to Briscoe, you can go to BTCC, you can go to WEC, you can go to British GT, you can go, if you want to talk motorbikes, you can go to MotoGP for about £100 for the weekend at Silverstone, which for top tier premier class motorcycle racing, unbelievable, you know? And it's just such a shame what they're doing to Formula One, but people will pay it. And that's why they're doing it. And you know, so when Dan earlier, right at the beginning, in the comments said the rich get richer, certain rich people do, but the poor get poorer, trying to pay for it. I think I will do a video on this because I think my opinion's pretty strong on it. Do you think it's purposefully pricing out everyday person though? I think it's just doing what they can to make more money. It's about money, isn't it? It's not it they can say stuff about the sport, right? But look at the paddock. It's the same people, isn't it? Like, you see Johnny Herbert, and he's just been let go by Sky, as we said at the beginning of the show. But it's the same people in the paddock all the time, you know? And then you get the odd person that they've decided would be good, like those, I don't know anything about them, but I know there's some podcasters that purposefully know nothing about Formula One. I don't know anything about them. They were interviewed once when I saw it dead quick on Formula One once. And they don't know anything about Formula One, and they got invited along because I guess someone from Formula One was like, that's relatable to normal people. But it's completely unobtainable. It's beyond, like, you can't get into the paddock at Formula One. You can't. And it's an elite club, and they're so in their own bubble. They're just so in their own bubble. They don't really understand what it's like for normal fans. You know, like, God, I'm going off on a right tangent now. But I don't have any shame in admitting the first time I heard a V8, it was a V8 F1 car strike up, I cried. That's how much it means to people. Like, I cried as a grown man. I cried hearing it, like at Silverstone, because it was a dream come true. And there are so many people that will never ever experience that because of what's happening in Formula One. And this, I've digressed massively here, but it's because whatever happens in the future, that problem's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. It's just going to get worse. If this new investment fund comes in and buys it, not just because it's them, but if this new investment fund comes in and buys it, they're an investment fund. They're in it to make money. That is the point. They're in it to make money. So it's going to become more expensive. They're not going to be gracious with their ownership and go, tickets are now £3. Silverstone still sells out like that, which is insane to me. It's insane to me. But then I read more and more people literally not going on family holidays so that they can go to the Formula One and things like that. But there we go. I could talk about this forever. So I think I need to make a video on this later on today. But, you know, F1 should be way more about the crying boy Kimi got into the paddock than the useless rich people who know nothing. I mean, look, I don't know. It's some psychological thing, Michael. I'll admit it. I am one of those people who, to my core, with every fiber of my being, hates it when there are famous people on the grid that know nothing about Formula One. Like, even if they had a thing where they randomly selected 10 seats from the crowd and said, you're doing a track walk with us. Like, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? I did cry. I didn't get into the paddock, George. There you go. But there you go. I mean, am I against it? Not inherently. 60% have said they're against it. 60% have said they're against the new ownership. Right now, I'm not. Right now, I'm against it because I'd want to see a long-term plan, what they had planned for Formula One. That's what I'd want to see. But there you go. There's my impassioned speech on that, which I realise I've just rambled on now for 25 minutes about that, so I'm definitely going to make a video on this. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'm going to go live over on twitch.tv/pitlanes very, very shortly with some Assetto Corsa Competizione, where we are going to be racing around Snetterton in an Audi GT3 car. So please do come over and join me. But I should be back 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Make sure you've liked the stream and subscribed to the channel. And yeah, I should be back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. with your latest F1 news. And also keep your eye out for extra videos. Sorry, Chris, you'll have to watch it back, buddy. Right then, I will see you tomorrow. Cheers. Bye-bye.